My family forgot my birthday 3 times because my sister was more important. Now they're divorced and begging me to come back. But I built a life without them, and I'm never going back. I'm 20 years old, work part-time at an electronics store while finishing college, and I need to get this story off my chest because it basically describes my entire life up to now. It's not that my parents are bad people. I mean, they didn't hit me or anything like that, but there's something that hurts more than that sometimes, and it's feeling like a ghost in your own home. I guess I should start from the beginning. When my sister Chloe was born, I was barely a year old then, so obviously I don't remember any of that, but what I do know is that she was born with a bunch of health problems and a physical disability that basically required constant attention. And look, I don't blame Chloe for any of this. You know what I mean? It's not her fault she was born that way. But it's not my fault I was born healthy either. My first real memories are of sitting in hospital waiting rooms. Like, I was about 4 or 5 years old and I already knew what each hospital we went to smelled like. I knew the nurses by name. I knew exactly how long each appointment took. My dad worked a ton to pay all the medical bills, so I hardly ever saw him, and my mom basically lived to take care of Chloe. I understood, or at least that's what they always told me. Your sister needs you. You have to be a good brother. You have to be patient. And honestly, I was the quietest and most obedient kid you can imagine, because I knew my parents already had enough to worry about. The thing is, when you're a kid, you don't really realize that something's wrong with your situation until you start seeing what other kids' families are like. I remember going to a friend's house when I was about 7 years old, and his mom asked me what I wanted for lunch, and I was like, wait, are you asking me what I want? Because that never happened at my house. Food was always planned around Chloe's dietary needs, her medications, her schedules. If I wanted something different, well, I made myself a sandwich from the time I was old enough to reach the kitchen counter. The only ones who really made me feel seen were my grandparents, especially my grandmother. She lived about 20 minutes from our house, and I basically escaped there whenever I could. My grandma would bake me cookies, ask me how school went, remember the names of my friends, things that seemed so simple but meant the world to me. My grandpa was quieter, but we had our own ritual. He collected model trains and let me help him set up the tracks and miniature landscapes. Those afternoons in his basement, with the smell of glue and wood, are some of my happiest childhood memories. But going back to my house, things got worse as I grew up. The first forgotten birthday was when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I don't remember the exact age, but I do remember that day perfectly. It was a Saturday, and I had been counting down the days all week. You know, like kids do. I woke up super excited and went downstairs for breakfast, expecting there to be at least a cake or something, but my mom was rushing to get Chloe ready because they had tickets to see some group she loved. And I said, "But Mom, it's my birthday." And she looked at me kind of confused for a second and then said, "Oh honey, I'm so sorry. But we bought these tickets months ago, and Chloe has been waiting for so long." She gave me $20. Well, actually, I think it was $5, and told me to order pizza and that the next day we'd do something special. We never did anything special the next day. They bought me a gift card to a video game store like 2 days later, and that was it. I remember going to my grandma's house crying, and she made me a small cake, one of those pre-made ones they sell at the supermarket, but she put candles on it and we sang happy birthday, just the two of us. And it made me feel a little better. But it still hurt, you know? The second forgotten birthday was worse because by then, I was about 10 years old and understood things more. That day they didn't even say anything to me, like, zero acknowledgement. I waited all day thinking maybe they were preparing a surprise for me, but nothing. My dad came home late from work, like always. My mom was busy with something about Chloe. I don't remember what exactly. And I went to sleep that night without anyone saying, happy birthday. Like 4 days went by until my mom realized, I think she saw something on the calendar, or an aunt called asking about me. I don't know. But then they bought me a cake from the supermarket, and we sang happy birthday on a random Tuesday. My dad wasn't even there because he had to take Chloe to another medical appointment. The third forgotten birthday was when I turned 12. By that point, I wasn't expecting anything anymore. Honestly, but it still hurts when it happens. You know what I mean? That year, there was minimal acknowledgement like, happy birthday, honey. But Chloe had an appointment with a new specialist that day, and it was very important, So basically, it was a happy birthday, said in passing as they were walking out the door. My grandma took me out for burgers that day and bought me a video game I wanted. She was always there for me. But it wasn't just birthdays, it was everything. When I was in school and had some presentation or event, my parents never went. It was always because Chloe needed something, had an appointment, wasn't feeling well, whatever. I was on the debate team in middle school, and we made it to the regional finals. It was a huge achievement for me, and my parents didn't go. My grandma did go, obviously. She always went. But when I got home that night after winning, my parents barely looked up from the TV to say, "That's nice, honey," because they were watching a movie with Chloe. And one time, and this still makes me angry to this day, Chloe had a tantrum and destroyed my video game console. She threw it on the floor and stomped on it until it stopped working. I had saved up for months from my allowance to buy it. It was mine. I had paid for it myself. And she destroyed it because she was angry about something that didn't even have anything to do with me. When I showed it to my parents, expecting them to at least scold her or something, my mom just sighed and said Chloe had had a difficult day and that I had to understand that sometimes she got frustrated. My dad gave me like $40 and told me I could start saving for another one with that. But the console cost like $300. I never saved up enough to buy another one. Things got to a point where I was basically invisible in my own house. A days could go by without my parents asking me how I was or what I had done. I did my homework alone, made my own food, basically raised myself. By 14, I already knew how to do my laundry, cook basic meals, manage my school schedule, everything. And it's not that I felt proud of that. I actually felt lonely, very lonely. When I was about 15, in a desperate attempt to improve things, I suggested to my parents that we go to family therapy. To my surprise, they agreed. I think they felt a little guilty, or maybe someone else had suggested the same thing. I don't know. At first, the sessions were difficult. The therapist was good and started implementing things like a family night once a week where we did something together. And that night was supposed to be sacred. No hospitals unless it was a real emergency. For about 2 months, things got a little better. We played board games on Friday nights, or watched movies, and I was starting to feel like part of the family again. But then Chloe started getting jealous. And, yeah, I understand that from her perspective maybe she felt like suddenly everything wasn't about her, but the reality is that 99% of the time, everything was about her. But she didn't see it that way. Chloe started complaining in therapy sessions that she felt neglected, that mom and dad didn't take care of her like before, that everything was about giving Alexander attention now. And look, I understood where she was coming from. Like, she was used to being the center of the universe because she had literally been the center of the universe her whole life. But hearing her say those things when I had spent my entire life being ignored was like a slap in the face. The therapist tried to mediate, explain to her that everyone in the family needed attention, but Chloe would cry and say that nobody understood how difficult her life was, how much she suffered. And technically she was right. Her life was harder than mine in many ways. Living with a disability and chronic health problems isn't easy. I know. But that doesn't mean my pain wasn't valid too. The problem is that my parents could never see that. For them it was always, well, Alexander, you're healthy, you can handle things, your sister needs you. The therapy sessions started revolving more and more around Chloe's feelings and her needs. Family nights became inconsistent again. There was always some reason to cancel them, and I started withdrawing emotionally because I realized nothing was really going to change. I kept going to therapy because the therapist was the only adult who seemed to understand what I was feeling. But at home, everything went back to how it was before. Then, when I was 17, my grandmother got sick. It happened fast, like 1 month she was fine, and the next she was in the hospital dying. That destroyed me, because she was my person, you know? She was the only one who really saw me, listened to me, made me feel important. When she died, I felt like I had lost my only real family. My grandpa was devastated. Obviously, they had been married for like 50 years, and about 6 months after she died, he decided to move to a nursing home in another city to be closer to my uncle. Losing my grandparents, especially my grandmother, was the final blow for me. I no longer had anywhere to escape. I no longer had someone who made me feel special or loved. All I had left was a house where I was basically just another piece of furniture, where my existence was only acknowledged when they needed me to do something or when I got in the way. There was one therapy session. I was about 18 years old at that point, where I finally exploded. The therapist asked me how I felt, and I just let it all out. I told my parents exactly how I had felt my whole life. I talked to them about the forgotten birthdays, about feeling invisible, about basically raising myself, about how the only person who had made me feel loved had died, and now I had no one left. And instead of really listening to me, my parents got defensive. My mom started crying, saying they had done the best they could, that I didn't understand how difficult it was to have a child with special needs, that she had sacrificed a lot too. And Chloe called me selfish. She told me I had always been the favorite because I was the healthy child, the child who didn't cause them problems, the perfect child. She literally said that I was the favorite. I sat there thinking, in what alternate reality have I been the favorite? But for her, that was real. She genuinely believed my parents preferred me because sometimes, just sometimes, they would ask me to be patient with her or help her with something. After that session, I completely withdrew. I kept living in the house because I was still in high school, but emotionally, I wasn't there anymore. I spent all my free time working, saving money, making plans to leave as soon as I turned 18. My parents suggested we switch therapists, that maybe this one wasn't right for our family, but I told them no, that the problem wasn't the therapist, and I stopped going to the sessions. When I graduated from high school, I applied to colleges as far away as possible. I got into a university in another city, like 6 hours away, and I moved there as soon as I could. My parents helped me move, which was ironic considering they had barely been present in my life, but I guess they felt it was their parental duty or something. The day they dropped me off at the dorm, my mom cried and told me she was going to miss me, and I just thought, really? You're going to miss me? When did you even notice I was there to begin with? In college, I started going to therapy on my own. I needed to process everything, and my therapist helped me understand that it wasn't my fault, that I hadn't asked for too much by wanting basic attention from my parents, that my feelings were valid. I also started making real friends. Friends who remembered my birthday, who asked me how I was doing, who wanted to spend time with me. It was strange at first, almost uncomfortable, being around people who saw me and cared about me. I reduced contact with my family to a minimum. I called my parents like once a month, occasional text messages, but that was it. They didn't seem to. I notice much, honestly. My conversations with them were always short, like 5 minutes about how Chloe is doing, what doctors she's seen, what treatments they're trying, and maybe a minute of, oh yeah, Alexander, how are your classes going? My first birthday after moving out was revealing. The whole day went by, from morning to night, and not a single call from my parents, not a message, nothing. Not even from Chloe. My friends took me out to dinner and made me cake, and it was nice, but it still hurt to realize my family literally hadn't remembered. The next day I sent them a casual message like, hey, it was my birthday yesterday. And my mom responded, oh, sorry, honey. It's just that Chloe had a crisis the other day and we've been very busy. Belated happy birthday, we love you. The second birthday was similar. My friends threw me a small party. I had a good time, and again my family didn't remember. This time I didn't even tell them. Like, what's the point? When I called my mom like 2 days later and casually mentioned I'd had a birthday, she said something like, oh no, honey, I'm really sorry. With everything going on here, it completely slipped my mind. And I just said, it's okay, Mom, don't worry, because by that point I wasn't expecting anything different. This year was my 3rd birthday since I moved out. My friends threw me a surprise party. It was incredible. There were like 30 people there, people who really cared about me. They decorated my apartment, bought me gifts, we spent the whole night celebrating, and again, not a word from my family. 0 messages, 0 calls, nothing. And you know what? This time it didn't even hurt that much. I realized I didn't need them anymore to feel complete, to feel loved. My parents got divorced like 6 months ago, by the way. My mom called me to tell me, crying, saying it had been very difficult, that the stress of taking care of Chloe all these years had taken its toll. I gave her my support, Like, "I'm sorry, Mom. That I must be hard, but honestly, I didn't feel much." My dad called me separately to tell me his version of things, and basically it was the same. Chloe lives with my mom now. My dad has a small apartment nearby. Both keep asking me when I'm going to visit them, and I always say soon, maybe during the holidays, knowing I probably won't go. Last month, my grandpa called me. It was the first time we'd talked in months. His health is getting worse, and he asked me if I could visit him. I told him yes, that I'd go soon, and this time I really am going to go because he, along with my grandmother who's no longer here, were the only people who made me feel loved when I was a child. I owe him that at least. I still go to therapy. I'll probably be going for a long time still. My therapist tells me I've done incredible work, establishing boundaries and building a life of my own, and I guess she's right. I have good friends. I'm doing well in college. I work part-time at something I like. My life is good. It really is good. And I achieved it all on my own, without help from my family. Sometimes I feel guilty. You know? I wonder if I should forgive my parents, if I should try to have a relationship with them, if I'm being too hard. But then I remember the forgotten birthdays, the nights I went to sleep feeling completely invisible, and I realize I don't owe them anything. I did the best I could with what I had, and they simply weren't there for me when I needed them. Last week, one of my friends asked me if I was going home for the holidays. I told him no, that I was going to stay here, and he invited me to spend the holidays with his family. I accepted, and it's probably going to be better than any celebration I've had with my own family in years. And that's okay, I guess. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you got. I don't know what's going to happen in the future with my parents and with Chloe. Maybe someday we can have some kind of relationship. Something better than what we have now. But honestly, I don't see how that could happen without them really acknowledging what they did, the damage they caused. And based on all our interactions so far, I don't think they're going to do that. For them, they always did the best they could in a difficult situation, and maybe that's true from their perspective, but from mine, they constantly chose one child over the other, and I was the one who always lost. So here I am, at 20 years old, basically without family, but surrounded by people who truly love me. And it's okay like this. Honestly. It's not the happy ending I maybe expected when I was a kid, when I still believed that someday my parents would realize and change things, but it's real, and it's mine, and I built it myself. And that has to mean something, right?